All right. Welcome to the Hoops Rehab Show with your host, the Game Injury Doc, aka Dr. Evan Jeffries, and Eric B. Mack on my right. We got a huge show tonight. A lot of things happened in the NBA. We had some good basketball on the Boston Celtics game with the Knicks, but some unfortunate news with Jayson Tatum that we'll get to. But what a night in the NBA. How you doing, Eric?
Doing pretty good, man. Yeah, definitely two big games. One was a little underwhelming tonight, obviously, with Minnesota taking care of business. But yeah, man, Knicks got to be feeling real good. And again, unfortunately, there seems like there's some bad news on the horizon for Jayson Tatum and the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So, as always, everybody, follow our social media platforms. Our handles are at Game Injury Doc and at Eric B. Mack on all the social media platforms, and as well as the Hoops Rehab Show, which is on YouTube and Instagram. And then, last but not least, please follow, share, download, like, comment, rate, all that good stuff with our Apple podcast and our Spotify podcast. And this show, after the live, will be uploaded and made into a pod in case you missed the live show or missed any portion of it. We got you. But let's get it cracking with the first game of the night, the Celtics and the Knicks. What did you see from the Knicks and what did you see from the Celtics kind of going forward with this game?
I got to say one thing. OG Anunoby. If you guys were listening last night, we said we needed a big game in terms of from the Knicks from him. We even said that if he gets 20, the Knicks should win the game. And what's funny is he got exactly 20 points. But now, in all seriousness, yeah, they obviously needed his offense, but a little bit better of a start from the Knicks today. Boston still built a double-digit lead into actually end of the first and then end of the first half as well. Right. And so I must admit, I was kind of thinking, oh, we're going down that same path. We were pretty much going the first few games where Boston builds a real big lead. And then as you saw in game 3, they were able to hang on. But man, Jalen Brunson carried his team, put his team on his shoulders.
Yeah.
The third quarter really was really changed the series, changed the season of the New York Knicks. And that's where obviously they made a big comeback. And then, I think we talked about it. We said, if it's a close game at the end, the Knicks have proven they could beat the Celtics in a close game. And so that's what they did. And of course there was an injury that, played a factor as well, but I think Knicks were up by 7 or 9 by that point with a couple of minutes left. So probably would have taken it anyways. But what did you see on this big night for the Knicks?
Yeah, I like what I saw on the Knicks. They were able to withstand Boston's kind of offensive prowess in the first half, and really went to halftime only down by 11, which they seemed like they probably should have been down by more. And then really came out in that third quarter and really kind of took it to them and showed that they had to get one, right? And like we said last episode, and what I was talking about, they have to play like it's their game 7. Because I thought if New York lost that game, there's no way Boston would be losing that series, right? So now New York goes up 3-1. Obviously, there's some more concerning factors with Jayson Tatum. We'll kind of get into in a little bit. But overall, their stars played well. Cat played well. Jalen Brunson played well. And like you said, get me 20 from OG Anunoby. And he did exactly that. And if you're getting, points from players like him, Bridges, Hart, like just getting everybody involved, then the Knicks are a tough team to beat. And they truly have been a better defensive team in these playoffs. And I think Mitchell Robinson has done a good job helping off the bench and really being a big factor with that as well. So I like what I saw of the Knicks. And man, Eastern Conference, who would have thought? Indiana Pacers and the Knicks are up 3-1 on the 1 and 2 seeds. What's your
Yeah,
thought?
man. If I mean, we obviously they're up 3-1, as you said. We expect them to move on. It's kind of like the '90s all over again with
Yeah.
these two potentially battling in the Eastern Conference Finals. And so, yeah, Knicks. They look. Karl Anthony Towns provided a big 23 points. It was a real collective effort. I was looking to see how many free throws that Mitchell Robinson shot, but he actually didn't shoot any free throws, which is
Yep.
pretty crazy. So
Yeah,
they
they didn't really play that Hack and Mitchell too much
yeah,
tonight. So
talk about that. And they probably figured like because I noticed last game as we were saying that it by doing that it got Boston in foul trouble, and so they probably were thinking
yeah.
otherwise this time around. And so yeah, Knicks needed what they do to get the dub. So they won those first two games. They were obviously a little bit fortunate, but that's why you win those first two games. It's huge, especially on the road, because
Oh,
as we've said, you technically just need to get one of your two home games, and you really put a stranglehold on this series. And so if it was a healthy Boston team,
yeah.
I would say, let's not obviously put them to bed yet.
Yeah.
But obviously with Jayson Tatum's injury and just the psyche of the team, I would imagine that whether if it's 5 or 6, the Knicks will be moving on to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, it just whenever you get the 3-1 deficit, right? I mean, there's only been 13 teams that have come back from a 3-1 deficit. And they also were a team that lost 2 games at home, right? So things are stacking up not well for the Celtics. They still have a lot of talent on that team and a championship team. But losing Tatum is just devastating. I mean, he had 42 points tonight before he went down with his injury. And to me, it's just sad to see like just players like this kind of going down. And 27 years old, right? So it's tough to see somebody in his prime, in his game, just coming off a championship and just not having healthy players in this playoffs is just not fun. Obviously, look at the Warriors and Steph. That's not fun without him. They haven't won a game since he's been injured, right? So it's devastating news. But the Celtics, all they can do is kind of rely on some of their championship experience. I'm sure the coach will try to motivate him as best he can. I'm sure that locker room was not a fun locker room tonight, and all's the best to them, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course, like when we say like I just thinking like I can't remember a playoffs, and there probably was some out there where just such key injuries to like teams that really have like finals championship aspirations. Obviously with Boston and Golden State, and then to a lesser degree Milwaukee definitely was in the running for at least going on a run, and then we know what happened with Dame with an Achilles injury. So there's been some big ones and some big ones that are just really kind of just playoff changing type injuries, and it's giving some
100%.
hope to some other teams.
Yep.
I mean, selfishly as a Laker fan, I just keep kicking myself because Lakers really could have made some noise, and you look at it, you're like, damn, we would have played a New York or an Indiana in the finals. Not that it would be easy, but I think you get my point. But yeah, man, it's pretty crazy to see everything that's been going on in these playoffs.
Sucks to see. So that brings us to our next segment. Something happened today, and that obviously has to do with Jayson Tatum. As soon as the injury happened, I obviously had to rewind kind of the play because it just looked like he was in so much pain. So I was trying to figure out if he sprained his ankle or if anything other was going on. Kind of was able to kind of see what position he was. Did not look ideal, like the original thought process for me, because the way he had to step back and then immediately just kind of gave up his right leg and then went to the ground and was in pain. But as soon as I was able to see the back version of that play, and you can kind of see when his foot steps on the ground and he goes into plantar flexion and his heel drops, and then you kind of see a little bit of reverberation, a little vibration up the calf. And unfortunately, those are typically signs of Achilles rupture, Achilles tear of the tendon. And, obviously they haven't confirmed it tonight. They said that he's going to get an MRI tomorrow. But from all news so far, Brian Windhurst reported that the Celtics locker room was just completely silent. like the most quiet it's ever been this whole season. Obviously, it was a big loss for them to go down 3-1, but besides that, it's just like, emotionally for them that this is potentially a pretty serious injury. So he will get an MRI to confirm, or, the hope would be somehow it's not officially torn. However, I will say with Achilles tendon injuries, right away. It's kind of what I talked about with Dame, with Damian Lillard, is there's a Thompson test. You squeeze the calf, and if the foot does not go down into plantar flexion, the Achilles is essentially gone. So more than likely, they have a pretty solid idea. The MRI is just for confirmation to see how bad the tear actually was, if there's some fibers still left. However, even if that's the case, they're more likely would have to repair it. So it does not look, I'm not too optimistic, unfortunately, about this injury. I hate to see it. We're hoping for Jayson Tatum. We're praying for Jayson Tatum. Hopefully it's nothing like that. But unless the video is lying, it seems like a very unfortunate injury.
When it rains, it pours, for sure. They obviously were having a tough loss, and I'm sure they would have just taken that any day of the week. And it's weird because just my naive self, watching it, I thought, I don't know, maybe I could be wrong, but I feel like when I see Achilles injuries, I typically don't see like somebody screaming. Sometimes it's just like, for example, like, Kobe or Dame, where you kind of just like, and they start, rubbing it in that area. So for whatever reason, when I heard the screaming, I'm like thinking, oh, maybe it's not an Achilles. Maybe it's more of an ankle or foot, injury or something. But as you kind of were reporting right after it happened, you saw the mechanisms, that would typically from afar show that it is an Achilles injury. And so a rupture. And so obviously for me, I always think like I put like a 12-month, timetable. I'm like, okay, well, he's going to be out a year probably. And so that not only affects this season, but it affects obviously next season for Boston and Jayson Tatum as well. And he's honestly a little bit on the younger side too, for what I typically see that injury. So is it a timetable 12 months, something like that, or?
Typically, yeah. There's been some advancement in surgeries like what Aaron Rodgers had, which are basically called like a bridge technique, and they're doing like a double suture. However, there's no really many players that have come back super early from it. I think Cam Akers was the earliest, where he came back at like 6 months. But even that's kind of risking, like, especially with him being young, more than likely it's like a 9 to 12 month type of time frame. And that essentially, because we're so far into this calendar year, we're in May. If it was even 9 months, that's February, right? And then at that point is like, do you even bring him back for this season, or just allow him to kind of rehab the whole season and get back to complete form like KD did? Like KD was out for the whole year, obviously, when he did his in the finals. Kobe, same type of thing, towards the end of the year, was out the whole year. And more than likely something like Dame will be really similar in that kind of prognosis too, where he might not play next year as well. So it's unfortunate. Like, possibly 2 Achilles tears to Damian Lillard and Jayson Tatum, right? Like, that is something that you don't want to hear. I did want to get to your point, though. You made a very valid point, and a lot of times I do look at that, like, based on whether or not they're in a lot of pain afterwards.
Reaction.
Yeah. So essentially, what happens when you do have a complete tear of something like an ACL or Achilles, the initial shock is pain, right? And then it's like, oh shoot. Like, what happened? Like, is there anything back there? Did somebody kick me in the leg?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've seen Kobe kind of react. We've seen a couple players kind of react like, oh, what's going on? And then the pain actually is not too bad after kind of that subsides, because your pain fibers have completely essentially been ripped completely, right? So then a lot of times where it's like you have some people will just be walk off on their ACL, or like Kobe walked off on his Achilles and then immediately knew, but the pain wasn't as severe. That's just not every time, though, right? We've seen it time after time again. Like people that had an ACL injury, right? They're thriving in pain, and it's still an ACL injury, right? Juju Watkins was basically on the court and a lot of pain when she tore her ACL. So it's not. It's hard and cut and dry to say like, oh, you shouldn't have pain. That might be a good reaction. It can be at times, but some people tolerate different things as well, and the way their body senses pain is different. So, to make a long story short, it really depends on situations.
Yeah, I'd imagine severity, obviously the person, the body, the how it was injured, things like that. And so, I mean, to your point earlier, yeah, I think because Tatum is like, I mean, it's Boston's pride and joy. I think we can kind of think of it as like maybe, chapter one is done for him, and he won a championship and went to another finals, and get him healthy, have him rest and get geared up. Obviously 1 full year out. Be back at 29 years old, and they still probably want to get another 4 or 5 years out of him. So I think that's kind of has to be the mindset. Obviously Boston's going to be trying to win game 5. That'd be the ultimate mindset. But in terms of Tatum, I'd imagine that's what they go with.
For sure. And, if obviously everything does turn out to be Achilles tear, looking at Boston's roster kind of moving forward, and they still have talent, right? This is a team that still has Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Porzingis, Al Horford, right? So they still, and Peyton Pritchard, right? So that's 6 players deep that they actually do have some talent. I just think at this point, this would be such an emotionally damaging injury. That's what will make it tough for them to kind of come back. I'm not saying that they can't possibly win game 5, which they can. They're going to be at home, and the crowd's going to be trying to pull for them as much as they can. So I still think this could be just an interesting series, or at least get to a game 6. And then who knows, man, if they push it to a game 6 and then kind of go into New York and have some momentum and then somehow make it back to Boston for a game 7, they still have talent on this roster to get past teams. It's just whether or not mentally they can.
Yeah, and that's why the Knicks they have to just end this. They don't want Boston getting any, momentum. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be the toughest game of the series for the Knicks, but they're going to just have to. They can't go with like let's just try to get game 5. We'll see what happens, but we got game 6 at home, and so Knicks got to just come out and try to end this as soon as possible.
For sure.